Hey, this is Kathryn with the Hope Matrix. Thank you all for tuning in today. I'm super excited to talk to you. We talk about all things science, stories, and strategies relating to hope and kind of how to maintain a hopeful mindset no matter what life challenges you're facing. So today I'm really excited to have with me Jamie Kelly, who I know through work. She's a colleague of mine and we've worked on some projects together in the past. And she is also a mom of 2 dyslexic children. And she is here today to talk to us both from the standpoint of being a parent of someone with dyslexia and also from children's. You know, this is a population that has a much higher and can potentially have a much higher level of anxiety and depression and hopelessness. And so we're looking to see how can we maintain hope dealing with some of the challenges. So thank you so much for being here today, Jamie. Good to see you.
It's good to see you. Thank you. You know, I always love any chance I get to come and mix work, and pleasure getting to visit with you. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And it's pretty ironic because it's actually Dyslexia Awareness Month too.
Yes, it is. October is Dyslexia Awareness Month, and I think it kind of, you know, gets thrown in with with everything else. But you know, I thought the timing of this was fantastic. And as you know, dyslexia is something that, you know, we've been talking about in conjunction with hope. And the work that you do, as you know, obviously I'm a big fan of the work that your organizations do. And when we started talking about that as it relates to dyslexia, I mean, you know, it just really hit home to me. So.
Yeah, that's great. And so happy to have you here and talking to our listeners today about this. Hopelessness is defined as a feeling of despair and a sense of helplessness, and it's often a consequence of oppression. So when we're oppressed in any way, and I think those with dyslexia have a lot of challenges that others don't necessarily have. And so when we talk about the despair and helplessness, it makes sense that it's high in this population. And so our goal is really to get strategies out to help support people so that they can deal with it in a proactive way. And you know, you are a shining example ever since I've met you of doing that and being a real advocate for those with dyslexia for your children. And so I'm really grateful to have you here today so that you can share some of that with our audience.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I did not in any way feel the calling to be a teacher, and thank goodness my children, you know, are surrounded by lots of great ones. But that's not to say, you know, if we look back even historically, dyslexia has not been something that was either understood or diagnosed. I mean, even up until, you know, recent history. I mean, I think Steven Spielberg was just like diagnosed in his late 50s, 56, I think. But I mean, you know, there was generations of people who they just thought you couldn't read. And it's not about not being able to read. It's just being able to learn to read differently and really reading from a different part of their brain. So, you know, that has not, we've really, really come a long way, even in like the last 4 years with like dyslexia legislation and protection in schools. And there's, you know, up until very, very recently, and even today, there's some states that don't, you know, recognize dyslexia the way that it needs to be for accommodation.
Yeah, and I think when we talked before about this, you talk about how dyslexia is often misdiagnosed or it's not caught. And so what are some of the signs and symptoms that people can look out for?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of, in my experience, there's a few things, but one of which is there's a lot of false information. Today, most people associate dyslexia with seeing letters backwards. When in fact that's not an accurate description, right? They see this as this like they can't read. There's a lot of other things involved with dyslexia. Dyslexic kids have, you know, more trouble with say things like executive function and spelling and handwriting even. And it's often accompanied by other neurological differences like say anxiety or a likelihood to anxiety or even just things like ADHD. And a lot of times, you know, my son was I have 2 kids with very, very different stories. And my son, man, that kid, he tested ahead in everything. He read 2 grade levels ahead when he was in 2nd grade. Man, he couldn't pass a 12-word spelling test to save his life, and got to the point where, and he couldn't, start when they were learning to write. He couldn't, he just kind of couldn't get writing, and they were like, oh, he's left-handed, he's a boy, he tests fine. And thank God, David Hansen, I knew him already, and I've introduced you to Dave. He's one of my very favorite people on the planet, and especially when it comes to this space. But David was able to, we had Landon actually tested when David was at the University of Arkansas. And so, David came back and was like, well, here's the problem, right? Like they're giving him 2nd grade dyslexia screeners, and his vocabulary is at a 5th grade level. So they're saying, no, he doesn't read like a dyslexic. And that's kind of often called stealth dyslexia, or it's a combination of kind of a higher IQ and dyslexia. So it kind of masks it. They're really able to overcompensate in other ways. But once we figured it out, we're like, oh, duh. I mean, it was, it took someone knowing what to look for and looking past a multiple choice test to see what was really going on, because I can remember being in tears sitting across from a room full of people who I know with all their hearts wanted to help my son, just because he was so ahead in everything else. And just a great kid. And I know they all wanted to help him, but when you sit across from the people that you are looking to as a parent to help educate your child, and they're going, yeah, I don't know, really, like this isn't working. He tests this way. We don't really know what to tell you. That was a very difficult conversation to have. So yeah, I think it's, in those situations, it can be misdiagnosed. Oftentimes, kids it gets real noticeable around 4th grade, when kind of the reading levels catch up to them. And then at that point, oftentimes they're labeled as lazy or not trying hard enough, or, just not wanting to read. And then when they're younger, like my daughter had very, very different characteristics. I was on alert. I knew that if a sibling had it, then she statistically is more likely to. So, we were aware of that, and we already had dyslexia specialists in place. And so, but her reading level wasn't the same, and hers presents entirely differently. And she has an easier time with writing than he does. And so even in my own house, I can see the difference in how academically it's visible, and then also how emotionally they kind of excel those things because they're very different personality type too. So I feel like I just live in like a little bit of multiple kind of reactions to that. But it's the one thing that's common is, both of them have been in tears multiple times saying, I'm the dumbest kid in my class, or, I'm not good at this, or I feel like a baby when I have to ask my friends for help spelling a word, or, they come home with those things. And that's stuff that doesn't, dyslexia doesn't stop at the end of a school day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and that's why I love what you guys are teaching with Hope so much, because, it does not stop at the end of the school day. And parents like me, I can't fix this. It's not going to go away. I can't fix it. So my goal, was really just, I'm not an educator. I am going to support and encourage and help those like you, and David Hansen and Access Learning Academy, and IFRED, and all these great organizations that are doing things to address this. And especially when you talk about getting it in the hands of parents and teachers, because that's where you're going to get into impacts of like multiple people versus who, just, you or I working with just my kids, or just, obviously just the one is important. But man, the way that you're doing things and getting this out in the hands of everybody is just, it's beautiful. And anyway, thank you very much for what your group does and how you guys just keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you spoke there too to the sense of helplessness that you would feel as a parent, and also as a child. And we have a thing that we have our students do called control the controllables, and think about, what can we change about this and what can't we change? And there's so much about dyslexia that you can't change. And so it's really important to maintain that sense of hope, to focus on what you can kind of change and how you can advocate. So is there a specific screener, like if our listeners are thinking their kids are having challenges with spelling or reading or, writing, are there standardized screeners that they can check out?
Yeah, obviously you can find some screeners online. The most efficient thing to do, and what I would advise anyone to do is, if you feel like your child is struggling, first of all, not all literacy issues are dyslexia, so there's that. And in any situation, if you use your gut and don't be afraid to advocate for them. And sometimes it takes raising your hand more than once when, everything else is really great for them, but they're just not into reading that's a difficult thing when you just know something's off. The best thing I would encourage anyone to do is reach out to their school and ask the school to screen them. And they'll share those results with you. And if they come back and say, hey, you know what, looks like your child shows characteristics, now I can't say it, of dyslexia, they will give you those reports, and then they'll be able to, within your district, hopefully work with them and get them into some individualized or some group accommodations there.
Yeah, wonderful. That's super helpful. And I think, with the brain is the most complex organ of in the human body. And as with mental health, there is so much that we don't know and that we're learning. So getting second, third opinions, I know that you've worked really hard to do that and to advocate for your child and to follow your gut instinct as well as what professionals tell you, I think is really kind of important.
Yeah, the other thing to remember is that it's not one and done. Unfortunately, throughout school, there's going to be different things. The best thing that we did was put a 504 in place that allows our kids to, be accommodated. For example, things like taking away them having to take notes off of the board was an absolute game changer for us. Because it would trigger my son's anxiety. He would come home like in tears, because by the time he was finished trying to write down what the teacher had written on the board, the other kids had already been working on their problem, and now it became homework for him. And he already had a hard time with it. These kids are working 10 times harder in school because, the parts of your brain that are used are just very different. But they have so many really, really awesome things about them. And we talk about that a lot at home. Dyslexia is also their superpower. And with that, though, like all of their superheroes, everybody has, even Superman has a kryptonite. And, for my kids, we say that might be reading and writing is kind of their kryptonite right now, or writing and spelling is their kryptonite. But man, look at all these other great things that they get to do, and look at what we would be losing if we didn't have some of these great dyslexic thinkers out there. I mean, some of the greatest minds and innovations in history. I mean, you wouldn't have the iPhone or Microsoft, and that's just a really, really cool thing. I mean, we wouldn't have electricity without a dyslexic thinker. So things like this podcast would have never happened without those really, really brilliant minds and that creativity. And even when we get into the arts, I mean, Picasso, some of the greatest artists at all time, their creativity is amazing. So you know what, reading and writing is difficult. It's not impossible. They need to learn it differently. And I just really encourage, they feel the negative all the time. I encourage them to just really embrace things that and build those strengths that they're going to rely on. My son is in forensics and debate because that's teaching him. He's naturally, he's quick-witted and a fast thinker and great with words. But so I want to encourage him to hone his presentation skills. I don't mean that, he's going to be pitching e-commerce with me just yet, but I mean, it does give him the confidence to stand up and do things like, hey, instead of turning in a written report, I'm going to do a video with an audio recap of the book that I listened to. Things like that, get creative. They love it. The teachers are usually, most educators will work with you in that space to kind of accommodate things so that they don't feel like they're sticking out like a sore thumb either. And that's one of the things that I think you just have to be, that I'm most cautious of is, it's not something I want them to be ashamed of. That's part of who they are, and it's part of the brilliant things that they're going to do later in life. But I want to give them all the tools that they can, emotionally, academically. I think there's a lot of technology benefits in there. But I want them to be able to be emotionally strong, because if they're emotionally strong, they can handle all this other stuff. When was the last time that you hand wrote a letter to someone? So, we could go, okay, we can accommodate those things in technology. We can't stop anxiety and depression when they feel like the stupid kid in class, or when they are embarrassed. Like we can't accommodate that, right? And so that's why, I think hope curriculum in schools is just so, so important.
Yeah, thank you. And that leads to the, that feeling of despair. So that anxiety, that feeling of sadness, the anger, like all of those feelings that are coming up on a regular basis. And I'd like to look at it just from the perspective of you as a parent, and also from the kids, and what kind of you all are doing about it, and how your kids are doing with those feelings, and then what's kind of tools they're using to help get them through that.
Yeah, it's funny. My 8-year-old, we always laugh because every time she wants to go write something, she goes up to our Google Nets and says, "Hey Google, how do you spell friends?" And because she's determined, and she is not, she is a very independent young lady, but she, watching her just adapt technology effortlessly. We never taught her to do that. She just walked up and started asking Google those things. Microsoft and I can post some links to a site we're putting together now, supportdyslexia.org. Microsoft has done some really, really great work in that space, with dyslexia-friendly technology and applications built natively into all of their programs, which is really cool. The best thing that we really do is we use dyslexia as a character trait, or as a skill set. Richard Bronson did that beautifully. I thought it was like the coolest, like the total geek in me. Richard Bronson, I had read an article where he came out and said that, he was going to put dyslexic thinking as a skill set in LinkedIn. And I was like, that's amazing. Like, that's just the coolest thing for them to go and see. And so we do things like, we watch Shark Tank. Several of the sharks on Shark Tank are dyslexic. We watch the Made by Dyslexia videos with Keira Knightley and Orlando Bloom and Jamie Oliver, like talking about how dyslexia changed, shaped them, or what they deal with today. Literally some of the most brilliant minds of all time, and some of the greatest innovation we have ever had as a world, not just as a country, have come from these awesome, awesome brains. And that's what we lean on, because and I know, like, we're always going to be, that's human nature, I think, to be more self-critical. So I just want to make sure that, I guess in a weird way, I can combat any negative feeling that they might have about themselves with like 10 other positive ones that they automatically, rattle off. And it was really cool to hear my son do it one day. He said something like, "Yeah, my handwriting stinks. I'm dyslexic. It's my thing." And he was like, "So are 40% of self-made millionaires, and Richard Bronson and Percy Jackson, although he ended up being a demigod." And he just kind of casually like glazes past it. And I love seeing that, because it's not something that he is viewing as like, "Oh, I have this deficit." It's not a problem. It complicates things, but it's there, and it's part of that is the reason that they are just as awesome and brilliant as they are.
Yeah, no, and I love how you've turned it so much for them, and focused on the positives and kind of what you can control and the benefits out of it. And yet the reality is, there are probably days when they're super sad or they're super anxious. And what are skills to get through that? I mean, is it just crying it out? Is it, Do they getting in nature? Do they exercise? Is like, how do they get that energy? Is it creating an art? Is there anything specific?
Yes, that's a great question because, a lot of it differs from the personality of my kids. I've got one that like really wants to like talk through it and articulate things. And I've got the other one who, just bless her, feeling vulnerable is just, if she can't do something, it just makes her feel mad. Like she expresses that with like, very competitively. So, in those ways it's different, but the one thing I've found consistent with my kids and all the, very commonly with, I think probably all the dyslexic kids that I know, with friends and stuff, is that a few things. One, 20% of people are dyslexic. So, in reality, more people are dyslexic than that are left-handed. I've got 2 left-handed dyslexics, so I don't know what that says about that. But I do think that creativity is a real core. We have been able to use that in so many ways and engage them when they're frustrated about school projects. Doing things like, hey, if it's a book that your child's assigned to reading and it's really exhausting when they get home, they've read all day and they've worked hard, audiobooks count. There's tons and tons of research showing that audiobooks have the same effect in your brain. And so like use those things and you get creative, let them do PowerPoint presentations, things that they will use later on in life. Those skills they'll use in elementary all the way into their professional careers likely. And if you can teach them to learn how they learn best and do things the way that they do, tapping that creativity is fantastic. We do a lot of my son's a character creator. My daughter is a slime chemist. Just really anything that kind of lets them kind of feel like they're, getting to express themselves and not being judged and, not having to worry about what someone else thinks. So I've realized a lot that creativity seems to be the most consistent thing that really gives them an outlet to work on.
Yeah, that's great. And that's the part of hopelessness, that despair. So getting from that sadness, that grief, mourning the loss of things that you maybe can't participate in, acknowledging it and moving on to what you can. So focusing on what you can do, but still expressing those feelings, because if we repress our feelings, it can often lead to addictions, all kinds of behaviors that aren't kind of helpful for us later in life. So that's a really important part of that. And another thing, so we talk in hopelessness, we talk about going from helplessness, so that feeling that you can't do anything, and we address kind of the controlling the controllables. But, one thing we teach our kids too is to set SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. So very kind of specific goals. Are there those? Do you use those kind of goals with your kids? Does that help at all? Have you?
Yeah, goals are, we like goals a lot because, we kind of tend to look at them as I can say a goal with one kid and I say a challenge with another, right? So, or I could go back to my Walmart days and I can say, it's an area of opportunity. But yeah, setting goals is great. I think being realistic. I don't ever, when I talk about accommodating or working with their teachers on workloads and what they're doing, it's not getting them out of things. It's difficult when they, give them a break. Like, it doesn't hurt anything to let them listen to the audio book. And we always encourage to listen to the audio book, as they get older, in chapter books and stuff. And then also just kind of reading along with it. So I literally get a copy of each anytime it's available. I grab a hard copy and I grab a digital copy. Then they can't get out of it and say, I left my book at home. But also they can listen and read along as well. That's but setting goals of hey, it might not be realistic for your student to read all 5 books this semester. But not everybody in the class needs to know that. Work with your teacher and say, hey, how about we do 3 or, whatever it is, and we'll do them in the same, have those conversations. They are usually more than willing to work with you, and let your teachers help set those goals. And you know, to goals that you're comfortable with for your child, and that still stretches them. I think the last thing we want to do is, you know, not stretch them, because there's so much potential in there, but we need to do it in a way that makes sense and is achievable.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the attainable part of the SMART goals. You know, we have to set attainable goals. So, and the other really key thing around goals is when they feel too big, to kind of chunk them down. And it sounds like you use some of that in the, you know, working with your kids.
Yes, we use a lot of that, actually. David Hansen, again, was, you know, he that was one of those things that, you know, you don't know what you don't know, as far as when you're talking about accommodations or what will help or what won't help. And so thank goodness we had resources and knew who to reach out to. But one of the things that I never would have, you know, really thought about, but made a remarkable difference is, you know, in a spreadsheet. So, you know, if you take something that's an entire page long, full of questions, and these kids are like, you know, all these words are jumbling a bit, like it's overwhelming, and they're less likely to do it. But when we started chunking it up a bit, especially when they're a little younger, they don't feel like they are being babied in the room, or, you know, that kind of thing. But it does give them a more, oh, okay, cool. Like, I already know those 4 questions, right? And then like move on to the next one. And things like that are just fantastic. And then also one thing that we've really noticed with, and obviously the new switch to COVID, but we had actually noticed before, is my son has dysgraphia as well, which is common. It's not common, but it's commonly with dyslexia. So his handwriting is very difficult for him to read, and he's got all these great things that need to come out of his mind, and it's hard for him to get it out there. Both of my kids, and I've seen it work. He's in 7th grade now, so I mean, I've seen it work from the time, you know, they were little to now. They've loved having the iPads. They've both intuitively searched with voice. They text with voice. That, as a parent, when they figured out how to do that, they got very long. But yeah, there's things like that. Even just in, you know, you can voice text your Word document and then focus on teaching them to proofread it, so that they can learn more that skill than the skill of having to think of how to spell each and every one of those words. Just little accommodations like that, honestly, they really, really do make a difference. Sometimes let them get pulled out for a test. Let them take a test with someone else, alone in a class, or, you know, when they're not so worried about time, or just to have extra test taking time. But ask, you know, don't let them struggle, and they're going to struggle, but there are always things that you can do. Lord knows I do not need to be the one that teaches my kids how to read. I don't know. We would all not go very well if I were now responsible exclusively for their education. But let's get education in the hands of these teachers. Let's get Hope curriculum in the hands of all these teachers, so that they can touch the lives and teach this in classrooms of every kid that ever steps in their doorway. And then it's not, oh, I have to go learn how to deal with emotions. It's, oh yeah, I've been working. I already know what this is. I know what this feels like. And I think today kids are more articulate than ever, and they're feeling a lot more of these things. You know, let them express it. Let them set up a YouTube channel that literally only, you know, doesn't really go anywhere. I mean, let them set up a fake YouTube channel. Let them talk about it, or let them not talk about it. You know, I think that really just comes down to your point of, like, just don't let them feel hopeless, because there's no reason to be. And when they're having those days, go show them all the cool stuff that has been, like, that the world has benefited from minds just like theirs. And then they get to kind of walk into school a little cockier, being like, yeah, I have dyslexia. Cool. And we literally saw it one day. So, you know, it was, it's a neat thing, but that emotional part and that hope that it's going to be fine and everything does not feel like fourth grade math. Like the rest of your life is not going to feel like fourth grade math all day, every day, right? Like that's not what we want these kids growing up thinking they have to look forward to is more difficulty. Why when they can do such great things?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and another thing we talk about with hope and maintaining hope is the importance of networks and having a hope network. So, and not just people that are around, but people that are really supportive and encouraging and have positive influences on both your kids and parents. So are there good networks and are there good ways that you found to set up networks for the kids and for yourself and going through this?
Yeah, you know, like I said, I'm very fortunate, you know, to be friends with the Hanson family. David and his wife Andrea both in this space are just absolutely angels. They've dedicated their lives to it. You know, they've support organizations like, you know, Access Learning Academy out there teaching teachers how to identify dyslexia and how to teach the science of reading. Look at Facebook. There's lots of support groups on Facebook, dyslexia groups on Facebook. I'm part of a couple myself, and you know it's interesting to cruise through that every now and then and hear someone be like, "Oh, I just found out my child has dyslexia. I don't know what to." And you see all these feelings from other parents. I think is really helpful. Just as a mom, and then I think. Man, we'll put a link up. Again, we're working on our site, supportdyslexia.org. We're going to have some really good links in there just to Child Mind Institute or, you know, Made by Dyslexia, the amazing site Microsoft has done in that space. You know, obviously iFred and your organization. So that's really just that's all the purpose of that really is for, hey, what do I do? Or who can I call? So we'll definitely get that posted and make sure that your listeners have that information. But yeah, just talk about it. I mean, advocate for it. And when you start talking about all these cool things, everyone's attitude changes about it.
But what about your kids though? How do they get support too? Like, are they ostracized from friends and made fun of?
No. Well, right now with COVID, different story, but no, I mean, for them, you know, they love their groups of, you know, they've got, I know my daughter Kathryn loves when she gets to kind of go to this small group time with other kids that have dyslexia in her school, so she doesn't feel like the only one in the class doesn't get it. Not that she is isolated at all times, but like in those certain areas, make sure that, you know, they get to see my kids, let them get that energy out. They both participate in the parkour at a local gymnastics thing. They love it. You know, it's a great way to physically, you know, kind of express themselves and get out their energy. I know you're a hiker. That's another one, you know, just kind of getting out and, you know, we do some camping and, you know, playing at the river and stuff. And just, you know, again, we try to remember that it's going to be frustrating, but it's not. You know, take technology from Tony Stark and let's talk about Iron Man, right? Like there are certain things that we just these kids need to realize it's not something that they need to. You know, we need to show them that they can achieve so many other things. So for them, having some achievements outside of that, a lot of these kids are very musical, very creative. My daughter's recently started piano and like loves it. It's something her memory is really auditory. So is my son's. They're both naturally good at it. You know, those types of things are fun for them. It's a confidence booster and it becomes an outlet for them as well. Whether it's, you know, painting or running or whatever, but it gives them a sense of achievement as well personally. Like even if it's, you know, I'm an advocate for, you know, just individual sports and stuff as well, just so they can be able to feel in control of how, of that part. Let them have control over something. So, and something that makes them feel good.
Yeah, and I think that's a great suggestion. I mean, you want to, if kids are struggling in school and if, with dyslexia and you're seeing that they're not connected with kids, I mean, one of the most important things for maintaining hope is having those connections. And so finding other ways for your kids to connect with other kids through art, through sports, through just different ways that isn't so scholastic.
Where they're not focused on their weaknesses. They spend, when we think about this, man, it's against human nature. They spend their entire school day doing something that is against their, or not against, but like that is focusing on all the things that they struggle with the most. And if we put any of us in a room or in a job where we exclusively focus on the things that we did not as well or that we struggled with, it's going to wear on you when you feel like you're not great at anything. At that point, you are struggling with every single thing that you're doing. So I think for that reason, like when you could put them in something like parkour or even running, let them run. Like those are things that they can be proud of and accomplish. And they can see that, like, it doesn't matter if I have trouble remembering how to spell something, or if somebody, if my handwriting is bad. It doesn't matter. Like, those things don't matter. And I think if all they see are the things that measure their weaknesses, that's a pretty rough thing for a kid to look at. It's a rough thing for an adult to look at. So for me, that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, and the research around that is you have to say 5 positive things for every negative thing you say, to have positive, really productive, engaging relationships with people. So to have healthy work relationships, school relationships, 5 positives to 1 negative, for your husband and wife, all of that. And it's, when you think about it, it's much easier. We focus much more on the negative. And I would assume that's especially true in that population. They're dealing with so much of what they're struggling in. So it's important really to focus on a lot more of the positives and find the positives and continue to emphasize those. So yeah, this has been so wonderful and helpful. I do, full disclosure, so our Hopeful Minds curriculum, it doesn't focus on dyslexia. It's a very general curriculum. And right now it's not exactly dyslexia friendly because it is all, and we talked about this yesterday.
But we've been talking about this. So you guys are you guys are well on your way. I said they have to be able to use it.
I know, absolutely. But it does show how to have a hopeful mindset, kind of no matter what you're dealing with in life. And the curriculum itself can be adopted for this population, the specific lessons, because
absolutely. And it wouldn't take, I mean, obviously you guys have done such a great job with that. It's beautiful, beautiful. I am so excited about that because I'll be cheesy here, but intentionally and unintentionally, but it makes me feel hopeful to know that there are people out there like you and, like David and Andrea Hansen and, all these great educators and really just people that are being instrumental voices and of change out there. It's a hopeful feeling to know that there's somebody out there thinking, hey, how can we fix this? Because when we could, I heard someone say before, like, you can keep pulling bodies out of the river all day long, but at some point we need to go upstream and figure out why they're falling in the first place and why they're getting there, right? So, I mean, yes, we need to keep pulling them out of the river, absolutely, but maybe let's try to keep them from falling so deeply into it as well. And that's, so it's encouraging and it's definitely gives a lot of hope to, parents like me who feel, I'm not a teacher. What do I do? I'm not a teacher. Like, what do I do? And so I thought, I'll do the only thing I can do. I will connect as many people that I think need to be connected to each other to have great conversations as I can. And I will really hope that they all turn out as awesome as you and Dave Hansen. So.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Yeah. So, I mean, to all our listeners out there, if you're struggling, if you have children that are struggling, know that you are definitely not alone. And there are things
1 in 5.
Yeah, absolutely. 1 in 5. And why don't we end with you just talking? I love when you talk it on your little rampage of, or your big rampage of superheroes and just people. I mean, yeah, I just want to end on that because I think it is so important to remember that no matter what kind of challenges you face or, children face, or that we encourage them that there are so many powerful people that have overcome
Mm-hmm.
challenges and have used it for their advantage. So why don't we kind of end on that note with you?
Oh man, yeah, you know, you hit my favorite spot because it was the only thing like I wanted to do was to show my kids positivity, and thank goodness there's so many of them. But you know, you look at Thomas Edison, Richard Branson, Walt Disney was dyslexic, so get rid of all Disney characters without these dyslexic minds. Man, Orlando Bloom, Keira Knightley, Whoopi Goldberg, Henry Winkler. I mean, they're some of the greatest actors and actresses of our time. Some of the greatest artists of our time, Picasso, Steven Spielberg is dyslexic. Some of the greatest, Captain Underpants, the author of Captain Underpants, sorry, not Captain Underpants, no, dyslexic. There are brilliant authors who are dyslexic. Authors, think about that. These are kids that struggle with literacy and people that struggle with literacy their entire lives, and they're phenomenal like authors, and that comes from their creative place. It comes because they create these amazing characters that everybody adapts to. So it's endless. It doesn't matter what area your kids are into. Give them an assignment of finding all the cool things about dyslexia or looking at 5 cool things about it. It's really interesting there. And the list of, I think Tom Cruise is dyslexic. Tom Holland is dyslexic. Jamie Oliver. You know, it's a really, really cool thing when they get to start seeing some of their favorite actors or actresses say that. And my son, I know, you know, he'll watch a movie and he'll randomly be like, oh, do you know he's dyslexic? And then like it moves on, but like he's just like, oh yeah, cool. That's like, you know, that's like me. So for me, that's the most fun, the most fun way to kind of encourage and make it cool. And it's just, you know, I've made such a big deal about the superhero thing in my house, and you know, about even, you know, a tiny piece of kryptonite would render Superman, you know, useless. And he's Superman. You know, Tony Stark, no technology. Those things happen, and it's different, right? So when we get to show them real life superheroes that are change makers and innovating and doing things, the Bill Gates and Steve Jobs of the world that are doing things like that, I think it gives them a whole nother level of what dyslexia is, to the point that my kids are like, yeah, I know. But you know what? You hear them at a store and they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm dyslexic. So is da 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 da. And it's you know, it's really cool then to kind of hear them feeling a little braggy about it. And it's so easy because all it is like letting them research something fun like that, which is also a great project to give them in school.
Yeah, absolutely. We do hope superheroes or hope heroes. And so it's great. You know, we could do that all specific to those with dyslexia. I love it. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's so important to get the message out, and the work you're doing is so great as a parent, and how you have looked at it all, and how, you know, you're working through all those challenging emotions and all those, that sense of helplessness, and you're still moving to hope. Which anyone can really
every
do.
day.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Every moment.
Every day.
Yeah. And it's that continuum. So yeah, I want to thank, and as you said, we'll put a lot of the links so the listeners can check out some of the work you're doing and some of the experts you know and resources in the space. So that's wonderful. We'll put that in the.
Yeah, and if it's all right, I'd like to end with, I'll let you know that we are going to develop a shirt on supportdyslexia.org that all the proceeds of that will go towards your developing dyslexia-friendly hope curriculum for students. So we'll make sure that you guys have that link, and we're going to do a really cool, just limited time shirt, just to kind of talk about hope and dyslexia and really get that out there. So we'd love to do that and donate all those proceeds to your curriculum and the work that you guys are doing, because if, you know, we need a million and one more of you. So thank you very much.
Aw, thank you so much. And yeah, I feel the same about you. We need 1,000,001 more of you. So yeah, thanks. Hope you all you listeners enjoyed today's broadcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Hope Matrix, and we will look forward to talking again soon.